to be connected and covered, and that just helps ensure safety. Because sometimes you have when like students don't build robots right, and like the robots hit each other, sometimes you can get like the battery parts to connect to each other, and then all of a sudden you have a ton of lithium here and a ton of chlorine here. And if you like open the connection between the two, then they react really fast and release a lot of energy. So it means it can light on fire very quickly if you don't design it safely. So these breakers and everything help make sure you design it safely and don't start a fire, because there's a lot of energy in this battery. It's got a ton of lithium ions and a ton of chlorine ions. And they just want to give the electron from one side to the other. So there's a lot of energy in here, and these safety features help make sure we use that energy safely and we don't just blow it into a million pieces. Sorry? Yes, it emits a Wi-Fi signal. It's exactly like Wi-Fi.
Is it the one which is producing the information,
so connected to the computer, we have like a remote control and from the computer we use like the arrow keys to tell it when to go forward, when to go back, when to go to the side. And as a part of that, when we control the robot like that, it sends out a radio signal, and that radio signal comes to this. And then this sends it through this wire, which goes to here, which goes to the brain. Now, the robot will also send information through the radio back to the computer. And part of this is it'll say whether it did the task that it was told to do. It'll also give information on how much electricity it's using, how much electricity is in the battery, if anything breaks. It'll constantly send that information back to the computer. So we always have an idea what's going on, even when we're far away, because it's always telling us how the robot's doing, is everything working. So the radio's receiving information from the computer in controls, and it's also sending information back in terms of just how the robot's doing. And it also allows us to, if something breaks on the robot, because we constantly have a record of what's going on, because the radio is always sending it, we can figure out what the problem is. Because we see like, the robot broke, and our radio told us it was this motor controller that stopped working. So then we know where the problem is, and we know what to fix. Sorry. Is there any ground? No. So yes, that's why it's a little bit dangerous. So that's why we have all these breakers. If we had a ground, we wouldn't need the breakers, because if you had too much electricity, it would just go into the ground. But here, because we want it to move around and everything, we don't have a good ground to connect it to. So for that reason, we have all these breakers here to help make sure not too much electricity is going. So in a house, if you have too much electricity, it just goes into the ground. It doesn't break things. So here we have breakers that will break if you have too much electricity going through. So it means it's a little bit more, it breaks more often than, say, a house's electricity, because if it goes over, then it actually breaks individual pieces. But it's the only way to do it. You have no ground. But if we had a ground, it would be a lot easier.
What are you talking about?
Why we don't have a ground connection
For
the battery? Like,
yeah.
And then it's talking about the breaker.
Because your level will be different.
Sorry?
Are they functioning the same way?
Yes, they're all very similar. They just each controls a specific motor. So if you follow these wires from this one, you can see it goes straight to this motor. So this one controls this motor. This one, if we follow these wires, we can see it controls this motor. So this one controls this motor. So these ones will work almost the same, because you want these motors to work at exactly the same speed, because we have a little gear that connects these two. So you want them to work together.
Yeah, so the reason there's different numbers on them is because in the code, we need to specify, there just has to be a way of naming the motor so that we know which controller we're controlling. So that's just for code purposes. Like if we show you the code, you can see in the code there's like 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. so that you can control each motor controller individually.
Yeah, so it's like we have a command, we have like a function that we can call that like we give it the motor controller and we also give it the like the amount of power we want it to give. And when the computer runs that function, it sends the information, go to motor controller 3 and give say 50% power. And then this motor will give 50% of its power to the wheels. Yeah.
So how do you program it?
So we use a programming language, which is the programming language is basically